Hey y'all, it's entry number 18 of this offseason series where we discuss a different player's fantasy value each day as a group. We are another day closer to the start of the 2022 NFL season. Each day we'll drop a name, go through some positives and some concerns of their fantasy profile, and then I'll give my personal opinion at the end. Today's discussion will be on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back, Kansas City Chiefs. The positives with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. To start, let's talk about his offensive line. Last year, the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line ranked 5th at the end of the 2021 season according to Pro Football Focus. Going into the 2022 season, they are projected to be the 9th best line, according to Pro Football Focus. They will bring back all 5 of their starters from the 2021 NFL season. Barring injuries, the line is going to be rock solid, with the only potential weak link being at right tackle, where Andrew Wiley and Lucas Niang will battle for the starting job. Next up, we gotta talk about his pass catching potential. While he wasn't utilized as a pass catcher much during the 2021 season, where he had just 19 receptions on 23 targets for 129 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns in 10 games, we have seen flashes in the past of Clyde Edwards-Helaire's potential as a pass catcher, like when he had 36 receptions on 54 targets for 297 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown as a rookie in 13 games. In fact, a big reason that the Chiefs seem to have wanted Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first place, bad enough to draft him in the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft, was because of the receiving ability Edwards-Helaire showed his junior year at LSU in 2019, where he caught 55 passes for 453 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown according to Sports Reference. With star wide receiver Tyreek Hill gone, the rest of the Chiefs' weapons are going to need to step up in the passing game, and it's possible that the team taps more into the pass-catching abilities that Edwards-Helaire has shown in the past. The last positive of Clyde Edwards-Helaire's fantasy profile is that this year he has no offseason health issues. Clyde Edwards-Helaire revealed that he dropped down to around 160 pounds last year after he got gallbladder surgery, stating, "This will be actually my first offseason being able to do a full training regimen. After the Super Bowl last year, the first Thursday in March, I had gallbladder surgery. My gallbladder completely stopped working. I was down to about 160 pounds. While this wasn't the only reason Clyde Edwards-Helaire struggled in 2021, it may help explain the level of his struggles. Moving on to some of the concerns with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. To start, we gotta talk about how he's mostly been just another guy in his first 2 seasons. Clyde Edwards-Helaire hasn't proven himself anything more than the average running back in his first couple of seasons in the league. During the 2021 season, he posted an average 11.8 broken tackle percentage, a below average positive run percentage of 89.1%, and had just 49.7% of his yards after contact according to RotoWire. A new challenger approaches. The Kansas City Chiefs added Ronald Jones this offseason to compete for touches at running back. Jones has had some ups and downs as a player, but the bottom line is that he's seen at least 100 carries in each of the last 3 seasons, and his physical build is a little more suited towards goal line carries than Edwards-Helaire. The last major concern with Clyde Edwards-Helaire's fantasy profile is his red zone usage. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had just 12 carries inside the 20, 7 carries inside the 10, and 2 carries inside the 5 during the 2021 season according to Pro Football Reference. As much as people talk about the Chiefs' high-scoring offense being a great opportunity for Edwards-Helaire's fantasy potential, it doesn't really matter if he's not the one getting on the field in the red zone to capitalize on those scoring opportunities. Some additional thoughts on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. During the 2021 season, Edwards-Helaire had 2 out of 10 games where he scored between 0 to 5 fantasy points, 4 out of 10 games where he scored between 5 to 10 fantasy points, 1 out of 10 games where he scored between 10 to 15 fantasy points, and 3 out of 10 games where he had scored 15 to 20 fantasy points in half PPR formats according to fantasy data. During the 2021 season, Edwards-Helaire finished as RB38 in standard with 97.5 total fantasy points and 9.8 fantasy points per game, RB41 in half PPR formats with 107 total fantasy points, 10.7 fantasy points per game, and RB46 in full PPR formats with 116.5 total fantasy points and 11.7 fantasy points per game according to Fantasy Pros. During the 2020 season, Edwards-Helaire finished as RB22 in standard with 140.0 total fantasy points, 10.8 fantasy points a game, RB22 in half PPR with 158.0 total fantasy points and 12.2 fantasy points a game, and RB22 in full PPR with 176.0 total fantasy points and 13.5 fantasy points per game according to Fantasy Pros. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has appeared in 23 of a possible 33 regular season games thus far in his NFL career, or 69.7%. Andy Reid has generally provided a below average number of carries to his running back room as a whole, but this is usually offset a little bit for fantasy purposes with his general preference for a bell cow approach on the ground. Personal opinion: Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going off the board as RB25, about pick 71 overall, on ESPN, and RB27, about pick 72 overall, on Yahoo. He's not really built to be a red zone back. That role will likely go to Ronald Jones, so in standard leagues, he loses some value. The key factor for his fantasy value is going to be what level his pass catching opportunities increase in 2022. I think they increase a little bit, but I don't think it'll be enough to make him a major draft steal at his current ADP or anything. Despite playing in one of the best offenses in the NFL, Edwards-Helaire strikes me as a guy that will be a low-end RB2, high-end flex caliber play. But there are a few other players I'd still rather chase at his current ADP, since I'm not a big believer in the talent, and he hasn't showed much in the red zone thus far in his career. For each of these entries, we will highlight a charitable cause or foundation. Today's link is for Clyde Edwards-Helaire's previous My Cause, My Cleats, which was for Muscular Dystrophy Association. Here's a link to that organization below. And that's it for today's entry. If you have a player that you'd like to see covered in the video format of the A Player a Day series, drop a comment below.